So I've exposed my air filter on my new bike, and it was kind of messed up. You can see that the filter's falling apart. So we went ahead and bought a new filter, a new uni filter, and we'll have to take this washer off. It's kind of glued to it because the filter's so old. So we need to get this oiled so that, because if a dry filter is in there and it's not oiled, the dirt will just go through it and it won't be stopped by the sticky effects of the oil. So what we found that works best is putting the filter into a bag and putting oil on top of it. And the oil we're using is Uni foam filter oil. We realized that the Beltray foam filter oil just falls off and gets all goopy and doesn't really saturate the filter better. It just kind of runs off the filter. So we're going to be using Uni foam filter oil. So we're just going to pour a little bit on top. Flip it over. Pour a little bit on the other side. And then just really work it to get the oil into all the crevices and in between all the cracks so that the dirt doesn't get inside the engine because it could wreck the pistons. So we're just going to really work it. Really try to saturate the filter in oil. And you want the filter to take it and have strings. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it kind of looks like a spider web if you put your finger on it and it strings out. And that's a good amount, a good rule of thumb for coverage on the foam filter. So we're going to get it all on the inside as well. So once you have your filter oiled and you've got the spider webs coming off of it, you want to have this oiled because air can get through the filter piece, this foam piece, and inside the box because it rests right there. And it can get through a dry piece of foam. You could see that there's no oil on it. So you're going to use your Uni foam filter oil again so that it creates a good seal and connection. So you want to pour a nice stream and work the oil in it so that you get that nice seal. And if it gets the spider webs and you get it all over the thing, it's pretty good. Now you're going to want to put your filter cage inside your filter. So that this little plastic piece pokes through the hole and it's nice and set. See, I almost had that out exposed and that would create a leak to cause dust to get into the engine. So you want to make sure everything is nice and inside the filter, so it kind of props it up. Then, now that you've oiled this, you're going to put it on and you're going to get the wing nut on that. Then you're going to put the wing nut on with the washer facing downwards. It's got like a little lip. You want that onto it so it creates a nice seal. Tighten it pretty tight. And then make sure this little tab here is facing outwards because that's how you're going to grab it off of the box. And there's two little runners. You want to be very specific to not get it outside those runners because that would create an air gap. So you're going to put it in between the runners like that. Making sure it's nice and on there. You'll probably want to get your hands cleaner for this, so I'm going to go do that real quick. While the air box is open like this, you just want to make sure all the connection points like this is connected because you don't want any dirt getting inside. Make sure the seal right here is nice and cleaned off with no dirt on it. You could do that with a screwdriver and just kind of wipe away the dirt, even a rag or something, to just get in between the cracks so that your cover plate right here can seal nicely against it. I have all the screws set into place so that this can seal nicely against that rubber for no dirt to get inside. We have the first piece on here and tightened up. You can see it connects the seat there and down here, and then we're going to put the black cover on right here. So I had to remove this because I had difficulty getting this seated onto the filter here. And you want these ridges to be embedded in that seal. Because if you don't, it could screw on, but you could have a gap in there and then it cause dirt and grime to get in there. Because I'm third person in the lineup and I have a lot of dust behind me coming into my engine. So that's why we want it nice and sealed. You also want to visually inspect that the two ridges are seated together. Like right here, I could see that there's no gap anymore, and that's just going to help no dust get into it. So now that the air filter's all changed, we're going to change the oil. Because we just bought it, we don't know what oil is actually inside it. It could be car oil, for all we know, so we just want to change it, make sure it's the oil we know and trust, and we're going to go take it out and warm the engine up, and that's going to do two things. The first thing is it's going to allow the oil to drain faster. If you notice when you're putting syrup on your pancakes, when the syrup is cold, it pours a lot slower and it's really thick, but when it's warm, it comes out like water almost. So that's just going to allow it to flow faster, and it's going to stir. Getting the engine warmer, it's going to stir up all the particulate, which is just like stuff that didn't get caught in the air filter into the engine, in the oil filter that got stuck into the engine, not the air filter, sorry. And it's just going to stir that all up so it comes out instead of is just settled at the bottom. So, without further ado, safety first. So if your engine is kind of cold, you might want to choke it. And for my choke, it's right here. But yeah, it's pretty warm outside, so I don't think we'll need to choke it today. And you want to have it either a neutral, which you can indicate by rolling it back or forth without the engine stopping it. And then you want to turn on your battery, and you're just going to start it. now that it's warmed up, we can take the fuel, or take the oil, drain the oil out, and then replace it with new oil. So let's get prepared. Now that the engine's warm, we're going to drain the oil, but be careful because you might have ran it to where the oil could burn you. So what you're going to do, you're going to get a 19 millimeter, going to loosen it, just enough, and then you can take it off and just do it with your fingers.
Okay.
That's some black oil. Okay. So, once you take it out, and we're going to let that dry, we have a few things. A spring, a filter, and an O-ring. Going to inspect the O-ring and make sure it's in good shape to prevent any leakings. And then you're going to make sure the spring and the filter going back in the same direction. For me, it went like this. So we're just going to lay that out on the workbench to make sure it goes in that same orientation. Okay, so while this is draining, I'll clean this side up. And then we're going to take the spring and the filter here off. It's like just a mesh. Gonna spray it with some carb cleaner. We're just gonna wipe it down to get the oil off and remove any gunk that could have built up on it over time. Same thing with the spring. And then, while this is continuing to drip, we'll come to the other side and change the oil filter, not the air filter. And you can see we've removed the cap to make the oil drain faster. And we have a Yamaha oil filter. And we realized actually that this one's reusable. It's not a paper one like we have on the other motorcycles. So we're going to get an 8 millimeter for these two bolts and a 6 millimeter for this bolt. And pay attention to the different lengths of the bolts because they could have different lengths. So you don't want to put this on wrong with the different lengths and wrong bolts. So we're just going to unscrew these. Do pay attention to the orientation of the oil filter because it's going to want to go back in the same direction. Now that I have taken this off, you can see this longer bolt went in like this. If I put it in the other side, I could crack the casing, and we don't want that. And then you want to inspect this O-ring, make sure it says to replace it every time you change the oil filter. But we don't have one, and we're confident that it is good and reusable. Then take your oil filter out and make note of the orientation. So for mine, this big O-ring goes to the back side, and this open hole where you can see inside the filter goes out. So you could see the big O-ring and then the small O-ring to where you could see inside the filter. And then be sure to make sure that your two bolts go in the right direction. So I forgot to inspect the O-ring and make sure that it's still usable and still acts and seals, and to inspect all surfaces and clean and wipe off all surfaces. Now that that's done, you can put this back together. Okay, so both of these require 5 foot-pounds of torque to be added, so it's not a lot, and it's easy to strip the threads on them so they don't screw it and they just keep free spinning. So once you've got it like tight, you want to just a little bit and a little bit. And then for this one, also just a little bit. And this one required 10, this one, these two require 5. So just a little bit more. And then with a clean rag, you want to wipe down any oil spills or anything you have dripped out on this side. And the reason for that is when you get an oil leak, it's easier to notice. So you're not like, well, did this leak out, or is this new, is this old? So you want to make sure that's nice and clean. So now that you were confident that it's all drained out, you want to make sure that you've cleaned these and they're the right orientation. So mine goes like that. And then you want to make sure that this O-ring and everything has a good coating of fresh oil so that it slides when it tightens, but still makes a seal. And you're going to put it like that. Oops. So once you've pressed the spring in, you can use the socket and an extension to just hand tighten it. And you could take your ratchet. And then I will get comfort information to my dad because he's really good with the torque to make sure it's tight enough. And you can look it up. I don't have the information right now, so I'll go get my dad. And then you're going to wipe everything down again, anywhere where the oil dripped on or slid off. Wipe it all down because you want to make sure that if you do get an oil leak, you know that it's new and not old oil from your oil change. Okay, so on the block here, it has a marking that's 1,000 centimeters cubed. And we want to put that in, and then a little extra because we changed the oil filter. Sorry about that. So we're going to put it in here, and then we're going to screw the cap on and level the bike and run it for a bit and like pump the throttle a bit. And then once it's all warmed up, we're going to view through the inspection window here. And there's 2 mark lines. You want to be in between those 2 and not higher and not lower. So, yeah. Okay, so we had to go get a funnel so it doesn't pour everywhere. And once you've ran the bike to get the oil flowing, you want to let it sit for a minute so everything can level down again and you can make sure that it's the right measurement in between the window. So, get this new oil open. You want to pour slowly just in case you pour too fast, it could fill in the funnel and then you have a mess to clean up. And then on your funnel, you could place the empty can so it drips all out and gets all in there. And you could see back here are the measurements, and this only has 900 milliliters, and cubic centimeters are the same, so it only has 900, so we have to put 100 extra in to get 1,000 cubic centimeters, and then a little more than that.
Go.
So be sure to wipe the cap clean so that you can know if you have any oil leaks. And we didn't put the extra 100 in, so we could just run it and circulate it in case it's like pooled in one spot and we need to get it to like another spot to get into all the nooks and crannies. So we're going to run it. We've ran it, we've let it sit for a bit, and then we're going to level the bike and inspect through the inspection window. So you might want someone else to look or hold your bike, and I'm going to have my dad help hold it, and I'll look through the window. Yep, it's in between the two lines. There we go.